Roger, people just don't have a clue the technical steps that we take before we finally kick this podcast off.
And if they did that, if they did have a clue, they'd know how really dumb we both are.
Oh, hey, it's good to see you, buddy. You're back.
I am back, yes.
Did you have a big weekend?
I had a weekend. It was, had 2 days in it, Saturday and Sunday.
Are you going to be like that? Roger, I am in a great mood. I've been waiting to talk to you. Usually we produce this thing on like a Saturday morning, but we might let our listeners in on the fact that it is now Monday evening when we decided to do this one. And this is Roger Dykes After Dark.
Ooh, how exciting.
That is kind of exciting, isn't it?
Yeah. The sad part is there's really no difference. Roger After Dark is doing almost exactly the same thing he does before dark.
Oh, Roger. All right, here's what we're going to do, Roger.
Okay.
This is from the audio booth where our director is right now.
Yes.
Talks into my ear here.
Yes.
And he says, would you guys start, please?
Okay. I thought we had.
All right.
I never know.
Hello, I'm Michael Shawn, and welcome to Roger Dykes Just Sayin. Roger Dykes is a teacher and counselor with a master's degree in family counseling from Texas Tech University. He is the owner of UV Blake Records and has written a book titled Non-Persons Rolling in a Normal World. And there's a few more things. Roger was born with cerebral palsy. Now a quadriplegic, he has been confined most of his life to a wheelchair. And for a while, even enjoying a career as a stand-up or sit-down comedian and after-dinner speaker. Disabled? Yes, but you forget about that pretty quickly because Roger thrives. So here is Roger Dykes.
All right. Well, Michael, it's good to be with you. Glad you could show up. I'm glad I showed up. For a while, I wasn't sure I was going to show up.
I might point out to our listeners on this podcast that sometimes, it's rare, but sometimes Roger is in a little bit of a mood.
Not really. I'm just looking at reality and saying, hey, we're lucky to be here.
Well, people, and again, they don't know what we're talking about, but sometimes when you fire all this stuff up, we're of course, originating from Studio A at 18PR, and Roger is in his office, in his home, and the audio comes together on Zoom. We have it all set up. But I think Roger's end gets moved around a little bit, and sometimes a little tricky to get you up and running. But we did it.
Well, now let's be careful what we say about, number one, what we do at my end, and number two, that I have never been up and running.
Okay.
You obviously have me confused with some other podcast that you must do.
I know where we need to start.
Good.
Have you heard from Austin?
No, I have not. Now, we got that out of the way. That didn't take long.
Okay, thanks, folks. We'll see you next time. Oh, man. Well, I was just thinking about that the last couple of nights. I thought, we're getting ready to do the thing with Roger again, and you and I have not talked, and it's because you've been busy. And so I was wondering if the people in Austin, you got to admit, not only is there COVID variants back on the radar, I mean, if you're going to make some excuses for these people, they've got some pretty good ones. The whole situation on the Texas border is for lack of a better term, nightmare for the United States Border Patrol and law enforcement up and down the border. And I don't know if we want to get into that, but well over 100,000 people have come into our nation illegally. The folks in Washington, D.C. don't really much care, at least, wouldn't you agree, Roger, that many times you don't listen to what people say, but you watch what they do? And I think we're watching what they don't do. I'm talking about the United States government. So many times you and I are always shooting low at the folks in Austin concerning your situation that we always talk about on this program. But now we have the people in Washington, D.C. at the White House who don't seem to really care that we're in the middle of an invasion here in Texas.
Well, I think the problem there is our state is the wrong color.
Now, when you say that, you're talking about red.
As opposed to blue.
Yeah.
If we were blue, we'd probably get more help. Although I understand they're crossing in California too, so it may not make that much difference, but it should make some.
Yeah. There's probably some wisdom to that. In fact, you know darn well that's part of it. And we will try not to be bitter about that. But gee whiz, Roger, how far as Texans are we going to get pushed before we need to push back?
Well, the problem is I don't see any way that we can effectively push back with any success until we wait until Congress, we have a chance to vote again, and maybe things will change then. I have more hope in the ballot box than I do our ability to push back.
Well, and that does seem to be the case, because any time there are, whether it's the state legislator or the first responders or whoever here in Texas, it does seem to kind of fall on deaf ears in Washington, D.C. It's very frustrating.
Yes, for everyone concerned. So I think we could just sit back and unfortunately have to wait till the storm blows over, and then when we get things calm down in Washington, it'll probably have a positive effect here. I don't know how much effect that's going to have on my situation. This is the problem. Every time we get things sort of moving along in a positive direction on the issues of which we have been speaking, we run into a seemingly big crisis. For example, it was a couple of years ago, I think, I don't remember the exact date, but I was making progress in getting in to talking to Governor Abbott, and it was you may or may not remember, but they had two things happen. Mr. Governor Abbott managed to get his feet in boiling water and burned his feet very badly and had to be put in the hospital. And about the same time, there was a shooting in Dallas where 2 police officers were killed. And between those two events, my world obviously got pushed back not on the back burner, I got pushed completely off the stove.
I've noticed that happens to you quite a bit.
Yes. And
with all due respect. Yeah.
Well, this has been kind of a trademark of mine as I have tried to do these various things through my life. Usually what happens, and I have it's seemingly out of my control, suddenly something will pop somewhere that totally unexpected, and that'll give me the inference I need for all the effort I've been putting into it. It usually comes from left field, out of nowhere, and I suddenly am put in a position to do what I want to do. So with that thought in mind, I've just decided this, like all the other times, we'll just be patient and wait and see what happens. If it happens, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But hopefully I'll get the opportunity I want. Of course, it's partly in large part because of the podcast and our listeners and what they've done and the promoting they're doing, and I appreciate all of that. But it'll probably just one day out of the clear blue. So from my point of view, it'll come out of the clear blue, and maybe I'll get that opportunity.
You know, what you're talking about, Roger, is faith. What you're telling me is you've got faith that if we keep aiming at our target and pushing forward, that you have faith that there is some positive outcome for all the things we've talked about on this show.
Well, we certainly hope so. And there's really not anything when you get to the point of not being able to do much more than you've already done, you can continue to repeat what you're doing. But if it's falling on deaf ears, you might as well wait and choose your targets carefully and wait for another open door opportunity rather than just firing at things that are not there anymore for right now. I don't think it's disappeared. I don't think it's gone. I think it's just been pushed back by events, more current events that are problematic to the state of Texas.
You know, Roger, I don't think I ought to say this. I don't mean for us to break our arm patting you on the back here, but the truth of the matter is, let me just divulge this information, Roger. It happened behind the scenes with you and I, but it wasn't but just a few weeks ago that you were talking to me on the phone, and you mentioned to me, do you think we need to carry on with the podcast? Do you think we are accomplishing anything with the podcast? It comes with a certain amount of work and a little bit of expense and so on and so forth. So you were looking, as any good businessman does, you were revisiting the whole idea and trying to measure the positive things that are coming from this podcast. And I think all it took, if I remember correctly, was one glance at a thing called your analytics, which in the podcast industry, analytics are like ratings, only they are much more accurate because every computer that your program is listened to on, any downloads of any type, of course, they have a specific signature and they know that it's there and it occurred. So when you look in the podcast industry, when you look at your analytics, you really see exactly what's going on. And so again, there is an increase of hundreds of people from the last time we checked, not so long ago. And these are new listeners. And so, you know, when you look at that, you think, well, we've got a message and we need to get it out there. And the podcast is still working for us. And Roger, you're to be applauded for that. You've come a long way.
Well, thank you. Well, I appreciate it, but I know I don't take much credit because I just answer your questions. And so your production value is far greater than the thing I'm doing.
Wait a minute. Do you guys hear that? I got production value here. I mean, you're very kind, Roger. I appreciate it.
It's true, though. The listeners need to know that it is you that makes this thing really work. I'm glad I can be here. I'm glad it's got my name on it. Yes, it's about me. I'm not sure. I'm not always comfortable with that, but that's still true. But the thing of it is, it comes with your help and your doing and your production, your ability to edit and produce. If they heard all the junk we say that they don't hear, They'd be thankful they don't hear it. But
now, wait a minute.
that's what makes the podcast good. But the listeners probably don't realize this. But when I hear the podcast when it goes over the air, I don't know what it's going to say either, because I know what I said. I know what was said in our recording. But by the time you get through editing and rearranging and all the things you do technically, it sounds so much better than it did before I.
Oh, Roger. Stop it. Okay. All right. So, yes, there is a team behind Roger Dykes Just Saying. And that's the thing, though, Roger. We're pals. I mean, you know, if anybody didn't notice that, we are pals, and I enjoy our friendship. Roger.
Yes, sir.
Quickly,
yes, sir.
And I don't want to take too much time on this, but for people that might be listening to the podcast for the first time, we just want to mention to those people that this whole thing started when Roger was getting more and more frustrated working with, and the word is antiquated, an antiquated system that was designed decades ago, and even the amounts of money that would be available for like groceries and so on and so forth, that it just didn't work anymore. But the biggest problem you were having with your caregivers, which you cannot survive a day without your caregivers. And that being in mind, you told me one evening, you said, you know, what I need is a platform. I don't have a platform. And that's when Roger Dykes Just Saying kind of got born the next few days after that.
And that was really interesting because I really just needed a wooden platform. But I ended up with the podcast.
Oh, well, anyway, we have.
The sad part about that is I probably still need the platform.
Well, we have had a dickens of a time pushing your, what is the word that I'm looking for here? You're not only your philosophy, but your basic knowledge of someone who lives and survives within the system that you are thankful for. You always point that out, but yet no longer does it work as far as your caregivers and so on and so forth are concerned. And so you took it to the state capital of Texas to try to tell them, hey, look, and they were the first ones to say, yeah, we know there's a big problem here and this doesn't work anymore. And we're going to find solutions and so on and so forth. Well, all they have to do is ask someone who has been in the program living longer than they've had their jobs at Austin. And because you've got this remarkable, intelligent ideas and philosophies about how the whole thing could be tweaked and would work so much better. Why is it you think they don't listen to you? Or is that fair to say?
Well, I think, you know, I don't know that anyone really has any obligation to listen to me anyway, but I think that they are busy and they don't have time. And we're not, the group that I represent are not politically strong at all. We have no power to speak of. And in Washington and in Austin, things generally run on power and influence. And the most powerful influence you can have in both Washington and Austin is spelled Money, of which we don't have. And therefore, we're not influential. And when you're not influential, you don't get things done as quickly as you do if you can put, you know, a few dollars in their coffers for their reelection. They're more interested in working with you than if you are a person who they know will never be able to contribute a dime to their reelection. So it's only, I mean, it's pure politics, which I totally understand. in that sense, and that's the reason it's so difficult to get programs like this looked at.
Well, and there are those people that listen to you in this conversation and say, well, he just needs to be thankful, which we know that you are, Roger. You point that out all the time. But the system, one of the fallacies is basically designed for a person that is completely disabled, like you are, to live with some family members around, so that if a caregiver can't show up at the last moment, or if there's one situation or another, there's family to step up and help take care of you for a day or two until things get back on track. You, and we'll point this out again, you have no real family around you, and you actually survive on what the state of Texas says is the way things work for someone in your condition. You want to talk about that?
Well, the fact of the matter is, most all people, that's probably not very good grammar. Let's try that again. Most everyone on this program would be in a situation where they have backup family members around who can deal with issues as they come up and all this sort of thing. And that's the way the state has it planned. When you end up in a situation where you do not have family, you do not have backup, and as a result, I am totally dependent on the caregiving system that the state provides. And I can assure you the state does not allow me to have enough money to be competitive with the world outside of government. But we've discussed that before, and it's still true. That needs to be adjusted. But the fact of the matter is that I am totally dependent on the caregiving system and on friends and neighbors who come in frequently and help out on small things, not only the real caregiver issues, but they are kind enough to come by and help out when they can. So as a result, that's how I exist. But it certainly would be better if I was in a situation where there was more money available and I could afford to pay people more, and there'd be more people available to come work here.
Well, yes, and Roger, that's one side of it. The other side of it is you're a very intelligent person. You have your master's degree. You do counseling. You've written a book. You do all this stuff. You are actually capable and have, over the years prior to being on this program, were successful at earning a certain amount of a living. You're able to make some money come in. You're a smart man. You can't do that. They will not allow you to do that. And that's one of the things you think need to be changed. Not crazy. They don't want to be given a little bit of money to millionaires, but the fact that you need to be able to have more than whatever your total amount is that you're allowed to have in your bank account, because they will come in and kick you out of the program because you made a little money somewhere.
Well, do you put it in concrete terms? Your total financial assets cannot, minus the van and wherever you live, cannot exceed $2,000. Well, in today's market, today's world, $2,000 is virtually nothing. So that's the problem. If I have $2,001 in my bank account, in theory, they can come in and kick me off the program. Now, how closely they watch all this stuff, I don't know, but I know that government has their hands and their fingers in everything. So I assume if they want to know, they can know. I have nothing to hide. I don't have that kind of money.
Now, Roger, is that your utilities on your home? and groceries and any expenses of any kind.
There are programs that I'm connected with. There are government programs that provide some of what you just mentioned. And so I don't have to use all my money for that, for some of those items. But the point is that you can't make any money. You can't earn a living because you can't go up to an employer who's paying minimum wage at whatever it is now or what it will be and say, okay, I would like a job. And he says, fine, I got one over here for you. It's a 20-hour job, but, come in here, go out there. And I go, I can't do that. That's too much money. Because if I make that much money, I'll get kicked off the program I'm on. And that's when he says, well, why are you here? I thought you wanted a job. You go, well, I would like a job, but I can only make, and you give them the exact dollar figure, and they go, well, we can't change the system just for you, and you can't even work 20 hours a week. And I go, you're right, I can't, because if I do, I'll go off the program. And,
I'm sorry, I don't need to be trite with you, and with all due respect, but that's ridiculous. Well, I mean, in this day and time, they need to allow you to take care of yourself in ways that you can, instead of making sure that you remain an impoverished slave.
Yes. Well, let me quickly clarify a couple of points so we don't leave our listeners confused. The problem with the money side of the program, the money side of the problem is a direct result of SSI, which is Supplementary Security Income. They're the ones that set the limits. If you go above their limits, you are kicked off the SSI program. If in turn you're kicked off the SSI program, the one I'm on in Texas, I will be kicked off of because they are interconnected. So it's really that issue is a federal thing. I understand it was back in the 70s when the SSI program was put into effect under the Nixon administration, okay, to put it in perspective. I also understand that it has not been significantly changed or adjusted since the 70s. So you've got a program that was designed 50 years ago that they're trying to still make work with the numbers they had back then. And
nobody does that.
That's the problem. But again, why worry about my program or this SSI? Now, the SSI program affects millions of people across America. It's not just a Texas thing. It's a federal program. So they are effectively affecting all these people, but none of these people can get together and say, okay, if you don't get this looked at and changed and adjusted, we're going to make sure you don't get reelected, because we don't have that kind of power. So while the oil companies and other big business tech companies and whatever can get their way and get things changed or fixed because of the money they have to contribute, we do not have the money and we cannot contribute, and therefore we are left out of we're not invited to the table to discuss these things.
Roger, I would like to ask our listeners a question, and they don't necessarily need to respond, but if they would just think about this. What if someone as influential as, say, the government came to you and said, we made this bare bones budget that you are to live by 50 years ago, and we want you to continue to live by that today? How ridiculous is that?
Yeah, well, that's the problem. And my understanding is there are people in Washington right now who are looking at this program and looking to update it because they do realize how antiquated it is. And that's all fine and good, but like so many other things, it takes government forever to get around to doing it, if they ever get to it, and then they have all these other issues that come up and they don't have time for it. So that's the role of the impoverished part of our society that's not wanting altogether. We do want more money, yes, because we need it to survive. But it's not that we're too lazy to work or whatever. But they build a program that limits what you can make, and then then you want to complain. They want to complain that you're not carrying your end of the deal. Well, I would if I could, but you won't let me.
That's exactly right.
I had a person a few months ago, well, more than 3 years ago, came to me and asked me if I would be willing to get myself involved in their education program. And it sounded good, and I was qualified to do what they wanted. And so after they laid the program out to me, doing what I needed to do, I said, I have one question, and this person said, what? And I said, what does this pay? And he kind of shook his head, and he said, Roger, I'm sorry, but it doesn't pay but $1,000 a semester. And I said, well, that's great, but that pays too much, and I can't do it. Because $1,000 a semester, dividing that out was more money than the government would let me make.
I know the specific thing that you're talking about in this scenario, and you would be great at that.
That may be, but obviously it doesn't work out, which there was years ago, many decades ago now, there was a political group that was for a minority group in this country, and their slogan was, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. And I look at what they're doing with me and with other people like me, and I'm going, you are wasting so much talent and ability because you fix it so that we can't work, we can't earn a living, we can't get any money ahead. And I know I will never be able to support myself totally. It costs too much. But I can't even enjoy earning any money because of the limits they put on the program and on me. So there's at the moment, there's no solution for this. Right now, like I said, they are looking at it. I understand in Washington. Should they change it, it would open up numerous doors. Unfortunately,
Roger, I want to connect to you. Excuse me. I want to correct you.
Okay.
With one thing that you just said. Right now, there is no solution. You see, folks, that is the travesty. There are solutions, simple solutions, and they don't necessarily mean, well, you just need to send us more money. There are solutions in just the way the program is administered that would make huge differences for you. And guys, men and women like Roger, who are living in this system and can communicate well with cerebral palsy, which that also makes you unique, Roger. But they have solutions. I guarantee you Roger does. We don't have time to go into them on what's left of our podcast clock here. But Roger, I have heard you talk about it over and over on this podcast. You've got ideas, and it would involve them sitting down and taking you seriously. And that's what we're pushing for.
Well, I know I'm sitting down.
Oh, that rapier wit.
Be careful how you use that word, too. Not wit, the other one. I want that clearly enunciated. All right. But anyway, no, the thing of it is, I understand. For example, very quickly before we end the podcast, there is a $2,000 limit on how much resources an individual can have and stay on the SSI program. They are talking right now. I don't know whether it'll pass or not. It's not to that, even close to that stage at this point, but they are talking about raising that up to $10,000, which would not change anything for anybody in the sense of making it more expensive on the government than it already is. But it would certainly give security to those of us on the program. I don't have $10,000, so I'm not going to be anywhere close. But at least I wouldn't have to be concerned about taking a part-time job somewhere that might put me over the $2,000 limit, which is not very high. So there is hope. There are things going on out there, and we will continue to monitor those. And if any of that changes, that could change the structure of this program considerably.
And again, Roger, we're out of time, but each time you say something like that, it unfolds a whole new deck of cards. And by that, what I mean is, like, for instance, if there were bad weather or anything else and caregivers were not able to be where they need to be able to take care of you, then you can't just pick up the phone and call somebody else and say, would you come in here, please, and let's work on this and help me out, because there's no budget for all of that. So you may be stuck just living through the blizzard, so to speak, sitting up in your wheelchair for a day or two, or
been
whatever.
there and done that. Been there and done that while I've been on this program.
Roger, you are a good friend, and I'm sorry. I know you and I have good conversations that last a lot longer than this, but that's about all the time we have for our podcast. And Roger, hang in there, buddy, man.
Well, I'm planning on being here. I plan to be here at least for the next 3 weeks, because I'm dying to see what we talk about next week. Or next time.
We will be back in 3 weeks with another edition of Roger Dykes Just Sayin. Bless you, brother.
Talk to you later, Michael. Thank you for coming by, and thanks for the listeners that are listening. We appreciate all of you.
You've been listening to Roger Dykes Just Sayin. If you'd like to get a message to Roger, his Facebook account is listed as Roger Dykes. Become a friend, or you can send your questions and comments to rogerdykes51@gmail.com. That's ROGERDYKES51@gmail.com. Our podcast reveals a new episode every 3 weeks. Rollout is on Wednesday evening, shortly after dark, Texas time. Join us next time for our next episode of Roger Dykes Just Sayin. I'm Michael Shawn. On behalf of Roger Dykes, thanks for listening.